All right, good day everybody. Now look at this, you see the pupil of the eye, how we are bringing more or less light to it. Okay, so in this tutorial, we're gonna do the color correction of a complete shot and we're gonna show the entire process. And this is the shot. All right, this is from our film Haya. And this can be processed in many different ways. We can process it like this, we can process it like this. And we're gonna show an example beginning to end. And as always, if you like these videos, please subscribe, like it, share it to help this channel continue doing these kinds of videos. So let's go for it. So if we wanna color correct this shot, we are gonna go to the color tab. We're in Blackmagic DaVinci Resolve. We go to the color tab. All right, here we are in the color tab, and we're gonna work with this nodes section right here. Now, because this is a raw format shot, on the bottom left, this very first area right here is going to be the raw parameters area. This is gonna allow us to do some important things at the beginning, especially with this part right here, the code using, and if we select clip, we're gonna be able to change all of these parameters. These are the typical parameters of the raw format in which we change data that comes right from the sensor, so we can modify the color temperature, for example. Let's leave it like that. The exposure, the highlights, etc., etc. Our objective in this initial area, if we look at the scopes on the right, okay, if we look at the scopes, we are looking at the red, green, and blue channels, and each of them is showing the distribution of the values around and across the entire scene. So we wanna get an initial distribution in the scopes that is balanced, is not extreme, it's a good starting point. But we don't have to refine things here, okay? It's just to provide an initial starting point. We don't have to go overboard with it. Now, there is a part here, this highlight recovery, which is quite important. If you have your highlights a little bit saturated, it can process the raw data to make a smoother rolling of those highlights, and this can be pretty useful. The color space and the gamma are gonna give you that initial curve distributing your tones at the beginning. And in this case, we've selected, because this is actually a shot taken with the Magic Lantern and converted to digital negative. Nowadays, I always work with Blackmagic RAW format, but this one was shot with Magic Lantern and transformed into digital negative DNG. And I've just here Blackmagic Design and Blackmagic Design Film in the gamma to provide a very, very flat curve. If we, for example, choose right here Rec 709, look at the contrast, how it increases with a Rec 709 curve. But with the Blackmagic Design, we get this really, really flat, great starting point for color correction. All right, so now if we want to do a color correction process, okay, I'm gonna give you some general useful guidelines of most of the stages involved in the color correction process. So typically there is something at the beginning and something at the end that typically are positioned in those places. The first thing is noise treatment, and the last thing could be sharpening. By the way, I really recommend in Blackmagic Resolve to label your nodes so that you always know very quickly what each of them is doing. So if you have to remove noise from the scene, it's always a good idea to do it at the very beginning. And if you have to sharpen your scene, it's typical to do it at the very end. All right, so noise and sharpening. All right. After noise, typically what we would do would be to work with the tonal distribution, okay? So it would be the tonal work, okay? The tonal distribution would be the next thing. Then we would go to the color balance, okay? The color balance would be next. Next, we could do some refinements, for example, to the contrast. Okay, we could refine a little bit the contrast, and we could do a series of refinements. And for this, Blackmagic Resolve has this type of node called a parallel node. So this is going to allow us to apply a series of treatments that are executed in parallel, taking the very same starting point. So we could do something else here. For example, we could work on the lifts, on the dark tones of the image, which we can do later. Okay, next, what we want to do next is to work on the lighting. Okay, so we're gonna work on the lights right here, and we will probably want to do a number of treatments here. That's why I'm going to add another parallel right here, because we may do something else here. In fact, we are gonna do something else. We're gonna work on the eyes, for example. Maybe we're gonna work probably we're gonna work with the window. Maybe we'll see. Okay. Next, typically we would have effects. Maybe we want to have some effects here. Yeah, we will see later. And then finally the sharpening. Okay, so of course this is not everything. You could have many more things, but let's say this is like some typical stages that you could apply. So we're gonna take this shot right now, and we're gonna do a couple of examples, an example or two of each of these. Okay. Now we're not gonna see the noise, which is it would be a topic for a complete video. But anyway, in many shots you don't have to get rid of noise. So let's start with the tonal. Okay, so the tonal distribution is the first thing. Okay, the first thing you wanna do actually is to look carefully at your entire shot. Okay, you want to scrub around and look carefully to see if the tones are consistent across the scene, or if, for example, in the middle of the scene the window is moving and a lot of light is entering the room. This is very important, because then you may have to use keyframes and apply different treatment at different points of the scene, etc., etc. So in this specific case, this scene is pretty consistent. There is not a lot of changes. All right, so now we're gonna look at the scopes. All right, on the right we look at the scopes, and what do we have? We have the parade, where we can see the red, green, and blue channels. We can see the waveform, where we see them all combined. We see the vector scope, and then we have the histogram, and then we have the color space. Okay, the most typical one you're gonna begin working with is the parade. Okay, so we look at the parade, and what do we see? We see that the tonal range of the scene is kind of flat, compressed. There is a lot of empty space at the top, and there is some empty space at the bottom as well. So what we're gonna do? We're gonna go right here to the color wheels, to the primary wheels. Of course, you could also use the curves. So anyway, in different videos, I'm going to explain different systems. But let's go to the primary wheels, and we have the lift, the gamma, and the gain. As you know, the lift is the bottom dark part, the gamma is like the middle tones, and the gain are the bright highlights tones. All right, so let's take the gain, okay, and moving the gain, looking at the scopes and looking at the scene at the same time, we begin to increase it. Now, there's something very important when we do this. If, for example, I go too far, what happens if I go too far? That I am saturating the highlights. What does it mean to saturate the highlights? It means I'm losing information, okay? Because if I go right here and I take the qualifier and I pass the qualifier, we see that all of these values are now 255, 255, 255. But remember, in color correction, everything is relative. Nothing is actually right or wrong. It depends on what your objective is. And it depends, when you saturate an area, either in the highlights or in the shadows, the question is there important detail that you wanted to preserve in that area or not? Because if not, maybe it doesn't matter if you saturate it, okay? Or maybe you just want to saturate it because you want to create a specific emotion or a specific effect. So again, nothing is right or wrong. Okay, it depends on what you want. Now, typically what you don't want is to saturate, to lose detail in any area that is important for you, in any area whose detail is important for you. Also, when you saturate, there is a problem that the transition between the areas that are saturated and the areas that are not saturated, depending on your sensor and your camera, that transition could look not really very nice, you know. Anyway, in this case, we don't really want to saturate. We just want to go brighter. So we're gonna take it up to there, okay? And now we're gonna go to the lift. And yeah, we see that we have space in the lift to go lower. You don't want to go too low. Okay, if you go too low, look what happens again. And now we see that all of this is 0, 0, 0, 0, almost. If we even go lower, oh, that's too low. Okay, if we go like this, everything is 0, 0, 0. Of course, we lost all the detail. Okay, so what we want to do is to take it to a position that is low, but not too low. So let's keep it, for example, here. And we look at the scene and we look also with our brain to see if it looks good. It doesn't matter if the scope looks good, if the scene doesn't look good. Okay, at the end of the day, the very best colorists out there, they really, well, they have a great intuition after working for such a long time, and they, you know, at the end of the day, their eyes are the deciders, you know, and ultimately that should be the decider, your eyes. Of course, if you have a well, you know, balanced and calibrated monitor, and etc, etc. Okay, so again, the scopes are a help. They are a tool. You know, they are a complement to your eyes, but you also have to use your eyes. Okay, so we've done that. All right, we've done that. We could have done it with the curves as well. Okay, maybe we'll see later. But let's continue. So we have stretched the tonal range. Now, if we want to see the before and after, we can do two things. We can do Control D, and Control D is gonna show us that node activated or deactivated, or we can do Shift D, and Shift D is going to bypass the entire color correction or not. Okay, so we see how we stretch the tonal range. All right, now we go to the color balance. Okay, and by the way, you will notice that in the node of the tonal range, it tells you here that we have applied the primary wheels, the primary balance, and well, also the curves, although it's not true, we just touched them. Okay, so we go to the color balance. Now in the color balance, we're gonna deal with things like the balance between, you know, the green, the red and the blue channels, the saturation, stuff like that. Okay, if we had a scene where we want to neutralize the color, neutralize means that what is actually neutral in real life, and neutral means the same amount of red, green and blue. So that would be something white, something gray, something black, something, yeah, the same values in the red, green and blue channels. So if we had something like that in the scene and we wanted to neutralize the scene, which means that neutral things should look neutral, okay, then we could pick this white balance picker down here. Okay, auto saving, and we could click on that part. For example, if the window is white and we know it's white and we want it to look white, then we click here. Okay, and then what's happening now is that the software, right, the Resolve is neutralizing that point. So we can see how it has practically the same values of red, green and blue, 225, 226, okay? And the rest of the scene obviously has adapted to that. Now, is this always the right thing to do? No, because color correction is not about you know, precision or engineering or whatever. It's also about storytelling. It's about emotion. So maybe in this scene, maybe this is a sunset, okay? And in a sunset, the light of the sun is being filtered by parts of the atmosphere, the blue frequencies are being filtered, and the light looks warmer and redder. So maybe you don't want to see that white wall as white. Maybe the wall is white, but you don't want to see it white. You want to see it warm. You want to see it reddish because the time is the sunset, okay? And you want to see it reddish or not. Or maybe it's the morning and the girl is depressed and you want to show it bluish. You want to show it bluish because you want to give like a dramatic, sad feeling to the whole thing. Okay, so again, everything is completely relative. You know, there is like like a strict, correct white balance if you want to see, neutral things as neutral. But in terms of storytelling, you can apply, any color balance you want that satisfies your emotional and storytelling requirements. Okay. So in our case, by the way, this wall is not totally white. So if I want to revert what I did, I will right click on the node and click reset node grade. Okay, and I'm back to before. So let's suppose, and by the way, I always recommend to use the color picker so that we can move around and we can see that, for example, her hair, if you look at her hair, well, her hair is pretty neutral, as you can see. So she has probably black hair, okay? So now in this scene, if, for example, we want to give a warm tone to the scene, we could now take the wheels and we could push the central point in specific directions to make the scene more, for example, more bluish, warmer, greener, whatever we want. Now, this has to be done very carefully, okay? Because these changes can be quite dramatic. So if I want to make it warmer, I could make it just a little bit warmer. Just like that, just a little thing. So if I do Control D, we're gonna see the difference is very subtle, but color correction is all about being subtle, okay? Later on, we're gonna change this. So this was just like a quick example. Now, we can also look at the saturation. So the saturation, I feel like lowering the saturation. So I'm gonna take it from 50 to something around 40. Okay, so I have moderated a little bit that saturation. Okay. Now we're gonna move to refinements. In the refinements, I'm gonna do a couple of things. Contrast. The first one is contrast, and I can modify contrast with the contrast control right here below on the left, or I can use curves, which is great. Okay, with curves, you have the entire tonal distribution from left to right, and you can position points. Okay, and as you move those points, you are gonna change that tonal distribution. And if you want to create more contrast, you will position one point on the upper right area and another point in the bottom left area, and you will move this one down and this one up. Okay, and you can see what's happening on the scopes. Always pay attention to the scopes and to the scene. So we are stretching the top part up and we are stretching the bottom part down. Now, as we do that, we find a little problem. We're starting to squeeze the extremes, which is not good. So it's not a problem because we can do different things. We could go back to the tonal part, to the tonal node, and moderate that gain a little bit, and also raise the lifts a little bit. Or we could do it directly in the contrast, just moderating these changes here, okay? So the great thing is that all the nodes are working together and these changes are not destructive. For example, if, let's say, if I take the tonal part, and I collapse completely the dark parts, okay? Now, if I go to the contrast, notice how the detail is still there, okay? Because the changes is a wonderful thing of Resolve. The changes are not destructive. You destroy them in a node, but they are still all there and you can recover them with another node. Okay, so this is something useful for you to know. so that you don't worry if you make something like that. Okay, but let's bring this back. Bring this back, please. Okay, here we are. Okay, so we were touching a little bit of contrast. Now, as I work with the contrast, I noticed one thing, that the mid-tones are a little bit low. If I want to bring the mid-tones up, I can do a couple of things. There is this pivot control that allows me to change the impact of the change in contrast with these values. So if I reset this and I increase the contrast here, now I can use the pivot to make that change impact different parts of the tonal distribution. And that's pretty good. You know, this is a good way. So if I do Control D, you know, this is before and after. But notice what happens now. We have increased the contrast, and on the face is looking interesting, but on the right part, I think is washing the light a little bit too much. So what if I want to apply the contrast only on the girl, on the character? So what I'm gonna do is I'm going to go to this area right here, and I'm going to apply a mask. Okay, so I'm gonna click on the circle mask. I'm gonna position this mask here. I'm gonna make it more or less soft with this. And notice that now the change in contrast is only applying on the person, okay? Which is what right now I feel like doing. I may change my mind later on. Okay, very good. And you can see the actual mask that is being applied with this control here, the highlight. And this is the mask that we are applying. And if we change the softness, we can see how we can make this more or less soft. Excellent. So this is the contrast. Now, what about the lift? So to show the lift very well, let me make a little change here. Yeah, because in the lift, we're gonna notice a very interesting thing. What I want to do is I want to make the very dark parts darker, but without saturating, okay? Now, in order to do this, we're going to learn how to use the log wheels. So you have the primary wheels, you have the primary bars, and you have the log wheels. Now, what is different with the log? The log is using the logarithmic in mathematics, and the changes are smaller and more gradual. This is important because of the following thing. Notice, if I go here and I lift, you will notice that the change is quite strong, and all the rest of the scopes are moving. You see, I'm moving the lifts, but everything else is moving as well. It's quite of a radical change. Okay, now if I go to the log, okay, if I go to the log wheels and I do the same, notice how only the very bottom part is moving. Okay, only the lifts are moving, and this allows me to modify and change the darkness of those shadows with a lot of precision without impacting and without affecting the rest of the tonal distribution. This is wonderful, isn't it? This is great. Yeah, I love it. So, and you can do the same thing with the rest of the tonal distribution. Okay, this is the before and after. As you can see, a subtle impact that is also constrained to the shadows. Okay, now let's go to the very, very exciting part of the lights. And by the way, I'm gonna make another change. I'm gonna go to the color because, when you change the tonal distribution in the RGB color mode, the saturation is also impacted, because in the RGB color space, okay, the actual pixel values are affecting, are simultaneously impacting the tones, the colors, and impacting the tonal distribution, the black and white information, and the color information. And that's why I'm going to go to the saturation, and I'm gonna control a little bit more the saturation. And I'm going to go to the tonal node. This is what you do, right? In color correction, you keep going back to your previous nodes and all the time tweaking. And I'm gonna take the mid-range. So I'm just gonna brighten slightly the mid-tones. That's it. Okay. All right, so let's go for the lights. So I want to bring the attention of the audience onto the character, onto the girl. So what I'm gonna do is, I'm gonna take, again, the masks. I'm gonna take a circle mask. If you don't see the mask, you go here and you select power window, okay? So I have created this mask and I'm gonna go to the primary wheels and I'm gonna increase the gain. Okay, I'm gonna increase the gain. Now, what you have to do then, you have to soften, okay? You have to soften the mask, and again, as you change in the RGB color space, as you change the tonal distribution, you also change the color. So the color saturation increases, so I can control it a little bit if I want. So that's it. So I have brought light to the face of the girl, okay, with a quite of a dramatic change, a bit exaggerated here. So that is the first thing that I could want, but now we are really sculpting with light and we can do whatever we want. So for example, let me hide this. What if we want to simulate that there is more light entering through the window? Maybe there wasn't so much light, but we want to simulate that. So we're gonna go to this other node and we're gonna add another power window. Let's put power window here. We're gonna put it here, okay? And we're gonna increase. Now, what happens if we increase it a lot? If we increase it a lot, we saturate, and the transitions between the saturated areas and the non-saturated areas, they look very ugly. We could decrease saturation. But again, everything is relative. Maybe this is the look you want, it is not the look I want, but everything is relative, of course. But I mean, typically you don't want to saturate it so much. You look at the scopes, right? You look at the scopes, you don't want it to explode. I mean, maybe if it explodes a little bit, it's not a problem. Again, you look with your eyes, okay? Maybe it is exploding, now it's exploding a little bit, okay? But you look at the scene, it's looking perfectly fine. It's looking fine, now it's not looking fine. Now it's looking fine, now it's looking fine. So right here, I like it, okay? Now we're gonna soften it. I'm gonna soften it, very important for those transitions. Okay, what is the before and after right now? Good, good. We're making the window bring more light, which is pretty cool. This goes with the gain. What happens if we apply a little bit of, of gamma? Well, good. If we apply with the gamma, we also increase a bit the mid-tones, So it depends how much is the washed effect that you can create, that you want to create with the light. So, this is what we have done, and it brings a different thing to the scene. Again, this is, completely depending on what you want, okay? All right, so this is cool. Okay, now we're gonna do something else, right? Now we're gonna do this eyes thing. But there is something else that is very, very important. Let's go to the beginning of the scene. Let's go to our lights. You see this mask, but look at this. The head is moving. So wouldn't it be cool that the mask followed the head? Yes, of course. And Resolve is fantastic for this. So what you do is you go to this next area right here. That is the tracker. Okay, and you click on play. And it's gonna use the cloud tracker, and it's really, really fantastic, and it's going to adapt, okay, it's going to adapt this mask to the face of the girl and keep it always in sync with it. This is absolutely fantastic. Yes. Thank you, Resolve. I love you. Awesome. Okay, so you will notice now that this mask is following her. Okay, and this is very good. This is really, really good. Okay, now let's go for the eyes. So what happens if you want to simulate that the eyes, the pupils of the eyes of the girl are receiving more light? Hey, you could do the same thing. There is no limits here. Okay, so let's go right here. Let's go right here. Let's start with this one. So, okay. All right, so we want to position it here. Cool. And initially we're just gonna position it right around there. Okay, now we're gonna track it. Okay, it's tracking our eye. Good. Okay, except for the very end, and you can use also keyframes to adapt this. I mean, this should be for a different video, but okay, we have this done. Okay, and we go here now. Now, what we're gonna do right now is we are going to moderate a bit the area. Okay, and now we're in the primary wheels. Now we're gonna use these controls to bring a little bit of light. Let's limit it a little bit. Now this, this takes a while to get right because, if you do it very tight, then, the change will be noticed. But anyway, so we brought a little bit, of light right there. And as we move, we're gonna notice that we cannot really see the window anywhere, but the window is right there. Look at it, huh? So you just have to find the right balance between, bringing a little bit of light to it and also making it soft enough so that you cannot notice the difference. So if we go back, so we notice how that light, that eye has more light, right? Now we could do the same thing with the other one. So we would go right here. I mean, we could do it in the same, but let's do it in a different one. So just for the sake of clarity, okay? So we would go here. Go here. Now, can we track from the middle of the scene? Yes, we can. Yes, we can. So I could track forwards from here. Good. Of course, at the end, it's going to go a bit crazy. Okay. And I could go back to this one. And I could track backwards. Yeah. So you can track forwards and backwards, and you can use also keyframes and manually adjust. When there are parts of the tracking that are not good enough, you can manually adjust them. Yes, this one is very good actually. This tracking came out really well. Okay, so we're gonna bring a little bit of light. So let's hide the window. Bring back the window. Moderate it a bit. Increase it a bit. Yeah. Okay. So this is it. Now, if we go to any different place and we scrap, you see we cannot see the windows anywhere. Okay, but we have simulated that this girl is receiving way more light in the eyes. If we get rid of these two, we see the tremendous difference. Okay, this is a room where there is not much light going into her pupils, and this is a place where there is way more light hitting her eyes. Okay, now we can moderate this impact. If I look at this eye, for example, and we go into this section, there is a control here called key output. If I put it in 0, then no effect. If I put it in 1, full effect. If I put it in 0.5, half the effect. Okay, so we could say, okay, let's put like 60% of the effect, and this is gonna be more moderated, okay? So, the difference now is gonna be from this to this, more moderated. And remember, if I now do Shift D, I go back to the very beginning. This is the very beginning, and this is where we are now, okay? Good. Okay, great. Okay, that was great. Okay, now if we go to the effects, Okay, if we go to the effects, and by the way, we can do the same thing with everything. If we go, for example, let's see the contrast. This is the contrast, right? If I go to the contrast and I go to the same area, again, this means no contrast. This is the full treatment, and I think it's too much actually. So if I put 60%, you know what is very typical in color correction, either in a still image or video, is that you take an effect a bit extreme and then you tune it down. You tune it down. This is very typical. Okay, you take it to the extreme and then you begin to tune it down until the place where it looks more natural. Okay, in this tutorial, I'm exaggerating many things. Okay, but the whole point is that you take it to the extreme and then you tune it down until things look more natural. Okay, good. This was the beginning. This is now. Okay, let's go to the effects. So, of course, in the effects, we can do like a million things. But one typical effect that people will do is a vignette. For example, we want to do a vignette. Well, very similar. What we're going to take is we're going to take a mask. Okay, we're going to choose a mask. There it is. But we're going to make it like an ellipse. And what happens now? If I lower this, it's lowering the inside. So there is this control right here to invert the mask. So I invert it. Good. Now it's doing a vignette. And now I can make this softer. Okay, and I can soften that vignette as much as I like. I can put the center. I mean, the controls of Resolve are just like amazing. So I can center the vignette exactly what I want to center it. Yeah, for example. Okay, so that would be an effect. All right, let's see something else in the effects. Another effect that is used sometimes by people is what is called a cross treatment. So in the effects, I'm going to go to add parallel. Okay, and this is going to add another node in the effects in parallel. So what is a cross treatment? The cross treatment is I'm going to go to the log wheels and I'm going to take two parts of the tonal range, for example, the shadows and the midtones, and I'm going to push one of them in one chromatic direction and the other one in a different chromatic direction. So I'm going to push the shadows towards the blues. I'm going to exaggerate, okay, now. Okay, and I'm going to take the midtones towards the warms. Now, what is the problem with the cross treatment? Okay, the cross treatment is interesting because it enhances the contrast and the differentiation between the details of the scene. But the problem is that sometimes people exaggerate it a lot, and this is when you look at the film and you notice that the shadows are blue, actually blue or green. Okay, this is not wrong or right. Again, nothing is right or wrong. Okay, I mean, it's not a problem. If the shadows are blue, again, it's a stylistic effect, a creative effect, no problem. But if you want to do it like that, great. But sometimes people just, they can go a little bit crazy with this effect. So if we take the color picker, notice right now that the hair has a lot more blue than red and green. So let's moderate it. If I do double click on the circle, it goes back to normal. So let's just do a little bit, just a little bit. Now a little bit the midtone. Now this is just a little bit. So if I do before and after, you see? Now it's just subtle. So if I look at the color picker, yes, there is more blue than red and green, but not a lot more, just a little bit more. Okay? The difference is, it is still a bit exaggerated, but it's not so strong, and it does, give another style to the contrast, So, and you can do it with different directions. It doesn't have to be blue and warm. It could be, green and magenta. It could be different things. Now, that is the cross treatment. Now, something else. Some people may wonder, this is a parallel node. If you right click, it tells you morph it into a layer mixer node. What is the difference between a parallel node and a layer mixer node? Okay, a parallel node is just going to apply different treatments in parallel, taking the same starting point. Now, a layer mixer, I'm going to click onto layer mixer. So now it's a layer mixer. Now, what happened with the vignette? It disappeared. Why did it disappear? Because a layer mixer, what it does is this. It considers each of the treatments as a layer. Okay, and now something counterintuitive. The bottom one for Resolve, the bottom one is the top one. Okay, so basically, this is like you're stacking layers on top of each other, and the top layer is the one that looks the bottom one on the node panel. I know it's a little bit counterintuitive, but you get used to it pretty fast, okay? So this means that this cross treatment is really on top of the vignette, and that's why you cannot see the vignette. But if you go to the layer mixer node and you right click, then it says composite mode, and this is the blending that is similar to the blending modes in Photoshop. Okay, so with the layer mixer mode, you can blend the different layers with these modes. So what we are doing right now, you will see there is the vignette, and you will see that we are blending the cross treatment on top of the vignette with these different blending modes. Now, of course, in this, it doesn't really make sense with this. Yeah, but let's see if we can see a different example. If I add, another parallel. Okay, this is not going to be anything useful, but just for example. So I'm gonna create a vignette here, and I'm gonna push it to be, I don't know, magenta. Yeah, okay, we have this here. So I'm gonna put it right here, and I'm gonna go to the composite mode, and you see, as I change the composite mode, the way that magenta is combining with the layer that has the cross treatment is gonna change. You know, this is darker, this is a difference, etc., etc. So you can see what it does, this layer mixer mode. And it's the same thing if I create another parallel and I make it green. Now we have a green and we have a red, and the green is on top. And they are in normal, but if I do add, they are adding. If I do a difference, it's the difference between both, etc., etc., etc. So this is what the layer mixer, this is the lighten, so it's the lighten mixture of both. So this is what the layer mixer mode is doing. So let's go back to the parallel. Okay, this is the parallel. Let's hide this one. Let's hide this one. And this is the cross treatment. Yeah. Okay, and this was the beginning. This was the beginning. This was now. Okay, very good. And remember, in the typical colorist work, you take things sometimes to the extremes. Then you tune them down. Like moderate them, do those changes more subtle, and you can go back anytime to the other notes. For example, you could go to the tonal and say, okay, what happens if I, bring the midtones a little bit more, you could also, use an outside node. What is an outside node? Look at this. This node, if you remember, this is controlling the light on the girl. If I right click and I select add node, add outside, what this is gonna give me is gonna take that mask and it's gonna create a new node that has the opposite of the mask. All right, so that I can influence the parts that are outside of the mask. And this is, for example, if I wanted to, whatever I'm not impacting with the light on the face, I want to do something to it. And you could do that with that outside node. Okay, this is the outside node. And this way, in this tutorial, you have seen all the important nodes in Resolve. The serial nodes, the parallel nodes, the layer mixer nodes, and the outside nodes. Excellent. Now, what if I want to sharpen this thing? I mean, in this case, I probably would want to keep this pretty soft because it's the face of the actress. But okay, if we wanted to sharpen it a bit or a lot, a very easy way to sharpen is to go to this area right here. That is the blur area, and there is this blur radius. Now, if you take it up, you're gonna blur. But if you take it down, you're gonna sharpen pretty nicely, actually. Well, don't do like this. But if you just take it a little bit down, is gonna make a big difference. Before and after, just subtle. Okay, again, I'm exaggerating everything in the tutorial just to show it clearly. So before and after, right? Okay, and again you could apply a mask to it, so that you don't impact everything and you don't impact the rest of the scene or whatever you want, So we could go back here again. We could apply a mask, and we could say, okay, well, it's a little bit strange, but I just want to sharpen the eyes or whatever, whatever it is. So you soften it, of course, and hey, it would be good to track it, of course, as well. You would want to track it and everything. Yeah, and you could selectively sharpen just a part of the scene. Okay, so this is a first look. My plan is to take each of these areas and many other areas of Resolve, and just go in extreme detail in each of them. Okay, so let's see. Yeah, this is right. Yeah. So this is what I plan to do in future videos. But as a first introduction, remember this workflow, the noise, the tonal distribution, the color balance, refinements to the previous steps, the lighting, the effects, and the sharpening. And that would be a little bit it. So if we go right here and we put this off, so we have just sharpened just the central part of the face of the girl, which doesn't make a lot of sense, but just for demonstration, and it's too strong and it's not very nice. So let's just like do it very, very subtle, just very, very subtle. Okay, great. Now, if you apply different color spaces like the LAB color space, then you can separate, you can separate, well, the color part from the tonal distribution part and many other things. But we're showing a bit of a simplified workflow today here. But yeah, I mean, if you like this video, please subscribe, give it a like, share with your people. This will help the channel to continue producing tutorials. By the way, this channel also contains a very interesting podcast where I interview very interesting people from different fields, experts of different fields, in very fun and interesting conversations. And you also have stuff about artificial intelligence, deep learning, well, a lot of different things. I will also put in the description a link to, if you want to watch the completed film that contains this scene. This is a film that was shot with a magic lantern in 3.5K in Egypt. Nowadays, I work with Blackmagic cameras, Blackmagic 4K cameras, and with Blackmagic Resolve mainly. All right, well, if you're interested to see more of these videos and you have suggestions for specific topics, please write it in the comments. Let me know in the comments what specific topics you are interested about, and anything else. And thank you very much for watching, and all the best. Thank you.